All right. Well, I think it's probably just about time to get started. Welcome everybody. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. So, you know, the idea behind these sessions is to engage. So we are going to ask that everybody who is able to turn their cameras on so we can see all of your lovely faces. We are also going to ask that you sort of log in the chat with your name and the name of your institution. Hopefully by now you're used to it, but there's some examples in the chat now. Couple of protocol, just be a good Zoom guest. Please keep yourselves muted unless our presenters have asked for you to come off of mute in order to participate in discussion of some sort. And a couple of reminders as well. I will be taking sort of a screenshot of attendance at the end. So when our presenters are done, please don't leave right away. Give me just a few seconds to grab pictures of the chat and of all of us together. And I will also be posting the survey link for anybody who hasn't had a chance to fill it out yet. That will just go in the regular chat room as well. And I think that's just about everything. So I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful presenters.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation. Today, we're going to be talking about best practices for working with neurodivergent students, aka meeting them where they're at. My name is Max, and I'm currently a grad student at Sarah Lawrence College.
Hi, my name is Claire, and I'm also a graduate student at Sarah Lawrence College.
Hello, my name is Dylan. I'm also a graduate student, but at Queens College.
Perfect. And currently, we are all tutors in the writing tutorial at SUNY Westchester Community College. SUNY Westchester is located in Westchester County, just north of New York City, and we currently serve about 4,000 full-time and 4,000 part-time students.
And within SUNY WCC is the Academic Support Center. This is a hub of tutorials, and it provides free assistance to students in a variety of subjects, including writing, math, and science.
Yeah, and we all work in the writing tutorial, part of the Academic Support Center. We offer assistance for all stages of the writing process, whether that be understanding the prompt, brainstorming, researching, organizing ideas, just articulating our thoughts, etc. And then with that, we're going to throw over to me. Hello, everyone. As Max said, we're very happy to be talking to you all about the topic of working with neurodivergent students. Obviously, this can be a very delicate subject, and as I'm sure anyone with experience is familiar with, this can be a very challenging subject. So to work with students who are interfacing with the world in a way that's so drastically different from our own, right? And so we hope you find our presentation helpful in showing you how to adapt your existing skills as a tutor in order to help these students through the particular challenges that they face, right? I'll start off by laying a foundation for how we should be thinking about neurodivergence as tutors. And then Max, she's going to ramp us up into how we can assess what students need during a tutoring session. And then Claire will round out our presentation with explaining how we can then meet those needs by implementing specific methods, throughout the course of a session. But before we can proceed to any sort of practical conversation as to how we should address neurodivergence from a tutorship perspective, we need to first think about what neurodivergence is exactly. So we can think of neurodivergence in relation to its broader term, neurodiversity, and neurodiversity simply refers to the diversity of human brains, right? Everyone here has a brain that's a little different from everyone else's. That's what makes us unique, and this is a part of what leads to the diversity at so many of our colleges, right? Specifically, when we talk about someone who is neurodivergent, we're typically referring to a person whose brain deviates from what society would define as normal, right? And so there are a lot of diagnosable conditions that fall underneath that category of neurodivergence. These conditions include autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, epilepsy, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, any kind of traumatic brain injury, intellectual disability, any kind of learning disorder, include even Tourette's syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, or spectrum disorder, and then PTSD. And some lists would even classify certain mental illnesses, such as major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder, as existing underneath this neurodivergence category. So I think it's important to keep in mind that when we're talking about working with students with neurodivergence, we're referring to a large swath of students, right? And a fair portion of the student population at so many colleges. And here on the presentation, we have a little graphic that illustrates how neurodivergence acts as this large umbrella term for all these different identities, which demonstrates how diverse of a category neurodivergence is, right? So even though people with neurodivergence comprise such a sizable portion of our population, it doesn't take away from the societal struggles they often face that we then as tutors need to be aware of, right? In order to encapsulate an element of this struggle, I'm going to turn to a concept that comes from sociologist and psychologist Damian Milton, and this is called the double empathy problem. So the double empathy problem, it simply states that people with different experiences have trouble interacting. So Milton applies this specifically to autism, but we can see that this is a concept that easily translates to our conversation about neurodivergence. Milton says a large part of the difficulty in interacting just comes from neurodivergent and neurotypical people having different ways of seeing and interpreting the world. And then on top of that, they develop different languages and personal methods for navigating that world. The place where this difficulty often becomes a problem is when that difficulty in interacting, it translates to a lack of empathy, right? So we can see this lack of empathy manifest in so many of the biases held in our current culture. So this idea that neurodivergence is somehow pathological, that it's a deviance of sorts from what is normal and correct. We often negatively frame neurodivergence as an inability, right? That stems from an impaired theory of the mind. So these are all examples of harmful attitudes towards neurodivergence. And in extreme situations, these attitudes can veer into ableism, which is when we start defining an individual solely by their disability. And in some instances, we can treat them as inferior, right? So here we have a cartoon showing how from the very early stages in childhood, these biases can be instilled in us with, guardians and such as teachers. They'll privilege certain behaviors and ways of navigating the world. And here in the second cartoon, we see how, this privileging continues as we grow up and enter the workforce. So with this final slide, I'm going to take the last minute of this section to emphasize what our role as tutors should be in all of this. I think it's important that we frame our role overall as service providers. It's our job to help these students, not to be a further emulation of the society that's demanding and insisting they change and conform as a way of achieving success. So here we have a humorous cartoon where a therapist is saying, everywhere else we use the word crazy, but not here, right? So taking this idea, we can think the entire world is going to set this difficult expectation for neurodivergent people, saying they're crazy, they're inferior, they're not enough, right? So what we're trying to encourage here is to have at least our tutoring centers be places where neurodivergent people can feel welcome and feel like there are people there who are willing to extend themselves and meet them where they're at. And so I think it's important that as tutors, we try to understand the way that people who are neurodivergent navigate the world and the struggles they have. And hopefully in doing that, we can help them. All right, I'm going to throw it over to you, Max. Thanks.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dylan. Now we're going to talk about how now we want to talk about how understanding neurodivergence informs students' needs. The first aspect of this is going to be cultivating a positive disability identity. A disability identity is the way that a person thinks about themselves in terms of their disability, and this can be positive or negative. In terms of specifically a tutoring center, this means, does a student think that their neurodivergence is helping them or hindering them? For example, a student could come in and they could say, I have to write this paper, but I have ADHD, so I just can't learn as well as other students. This is an example of a negative disability identity. Another example would be a student coming in and saying, oh, I have to write this paper and I have ADHD, which means that I have a unique perspective that others don't have, but I do learn in a different way than other students. That is an example of a positive identity. Our role as tutors is to help them cultivate a positive disability identity, specifically in terms of the way that they are learning and how we can help them best learn. Another thing that we want to think about when thinking about what students need is acceptance, awareness, and affirmation. So acceptance means we need to try to avoid thinking of neurotypical as this baseline or standard. We want to accommodate rather than diminish their needs. We don't want to fit students into that standard that Dylan was talking about earlier. Part of this means that thinking about what we want from them might not be what they need. So sometimes we might want a student to sit down and work on an entire paper with us, but what they need is just to go over the instructions and to do the work on their own. Sometimes a student might come in with a numbered assignment, 1 through 5, and they're really struggling with question 2. We might want them to move on to question 3 and come back to question 2, but they might need to work on question 1, then 2, then 3. And so we really need to be conscious of what they are needing from us. The second thing that they need is awareness. We need to be aware that sometimes a lack of eye contact does not mean that they aren't listening. Struggling with due dates doesn't mean that they don't care about their assignments. Sometimes students might not want to have a full dialogue or conversation with you, but that doesn't mean that they aren't trying to learn or that they aren't trying to do their best to complete their assignment. Ultimately, they came to the tutoring center for help, and we need to be aware that they are wanting help because they are here. The last thing that we want to help students with is affirmation. This goes back to cultivating that positive disability identity, which means that we need to praise them for the work that they're doing. This can be as simple as telling them, hey, you did a really great job with this sentence. It could also be something like if they come in and they say, I'm really stuck. I have no idea what to do right now. You could say, well, great job that you came here. This is a really wonderful first step. Just letting them know that what they are doing a good job and they are doing the right thing just by being here and looking for help. Right now we will have you scan this QR code, or there will be a link in the chat. This is a Padlet, and there's going to be 3 questions that we'll ask you to respond to, just really short responses. You don't have to respond to all of them if you don't feel like you have an answer to all of them. And then we will give you about 3 minutes for that, and then we'll go over some of these responses.
For anyone who doesn't have access to their phone or can't use the QR code, the link to the first Padlet has also just gone up in the chat.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Feel free to keep typing in answers if any ideas come to you as we're talking about this. I just want to touch on some of the answers from each of these. So for the first question, what are some ways you might help a student reframe a negative belief about their neurodivergence into something more empowering? These are really great examples. I see like you can do this. Let's break down the problem step by step. We're actually going to get into that a little bit in the next section as well. Um, that's okay. That's why we're here to work through things together. Also awesome. I really like, there's a couple of you that noted like sharing your own experiences of being neurodivergent. I think that's really wonderful being able to relate to students. Students feel really comfortable when they can work with somebody that they feel like they can relate to. And so I think that any way that we can do that is really wonderful. So that is really awesome. I also really love this one. Not everyone focuses in the same way. What can we do to help make focusing easier? Taking into, again, thinking about what they need and taking things into account from their perspective as well. Oftentimes, our students know what they need best, and it's about how we can help them get that, right? You're not bad at it, just maybe unfamiliar or unpracticed. Let's get you familiar. That's really awesome. Again, thinking about these things might be new to them, and we are here to help them with everything. Um, let's see if we can make this work for you is another really wonderful one. I really like that, thinking about, yeah, we are making things work for them. We don't have to make them shift to try to make things easier. Not being able to focus doesn't mean you're bad at this. Come on, let's try again. That's a really wonderful one. I think that is something like a lot of students come in and they say, oh, I just can't focus. I have a hard time with the readings or something like that. Just reminding them that they can always try again and come back to things is really wonderful. And then, yeah, this one, I'd remind them that focus can look different for everyone. Maybe their brain works best when they move or listen to music. That's not bad. It's just a different strength. This is really wonderful, giving them sort of these concrete ideas of things to try to help them focus as well. Really great work with this one. Thank you all. Looking at this second question here, what are some specific ways you could affirm a neurodivergent student's efforts, even if the outcome wasn't perfect by typical standards? And thinking beyond just good job. I really point out a specific part of their work that was good. I loved the way you approached this part, or this is absolutely the right first step. Great examples. Yeah, even like little things we can praise, right? It all matters. Be specific about what is good, about what they have produced. Also praise effort, not just product. Note that they have worked hard. Absolutely. I think really, noting how hard that they are working, acknowledging effort is really, really important for everybody. Focusing on growth, using specific examples, showing a lot of improvement. This is really great for people that come in multiple times. Maybe their first session, they really struggle with something, but their second session, it's a little bit easier for them. Sometimes it's hard for students to see their own improvement, and so us telling them that they are improving can be really, really wonderful. Great job. Probably emphasize progress and accomplishments. Maybe a test grade wasn't good, but the student understands the material more than they did before. Absolutely, yeah, right? Like it's always these little things. Not everything has to be an A plus for it to be good, right? I don't look at typical standards. I encourage the efforts, the growth, and that they came in and want help with their homework/tests overall, giving individual support. Again, really, really wonderful. These are all great examples of things to do when it's like ways to praise a student, even if the outcome isn't perfect, right? And then I'll pass it to Dylan to respond to the third question.
Hey, can everyone hear me? All good? Okay, so yeah, our third question is, how might you respond if a student expressed shame or frustration about their learning style? A lot of great ones here. I love this response here. It says, so it depends on the student, but asking them to reframe or find something they like about themselves. I also help them understand self-compassion techniques, forgiveness, and self-grace, then explore their superpowers and ask if they are ready to reframe in a way that's positive. That's great. I love the point that it depends on the student. Like so much of the work we do as tutors is being flexible and being able to, change up our strategies or change up how we address someone depending on who it is, right? There were a lot of here, empathy is an excellent tool, right? I think for one of the other questions, someone said they might be self-deprecating about themselves. And this is all really great. It's about creating a comforting environment so that the student is feels okay opening up to you. And given this question, it sounds like this student is already at least opened up to expressing, their insecurities when it comes to different ways of learning. So from this question, you already are at a great place where the student feels comfortable enough to open up to you. I love how in everyone's responses, they're taking advantage of that openness, and they're using that as a way to get closer with the student so that they can move that student forward in how they're working. Yes, validating feelings, right? Validating feelings. Just because you have a different style doesn't mean that it's inferior, right? There's a lot of ways we can contextualize the way that a student is struggling, and in doing so, help them feel better about their situation, right? As we said, everyone goes through these kinds of struggles. Everyone has these sorts of problems. Reassuring, empathizing with the student, and then introducing options for them to have going forward. Like, okay, this isn't, you feel insecure about this. Here's other paths we can take. How do you feel about this? All great responses here. And I think with that, we might throw it over to Claire for our third section.
Hi, everyone. Before I launch into my section, I would like to thank my colleague Dylan for providing such a wonderful foundation for neurodivergence, and my colleague Max for talking about some attitudinal shifts that we can make as tutors to best accommodate neurodivergence. In this section, we're going to be talking about the more practical application of strategies. So we're understanding how we can shift our tangible behavior to best meet students' needs. All right, so again, we're altering our approach to best serve students. We want to meet them where they're at. The first thing that we might want to focus on as tutors is we want to use neuroaffirmative language, statements, and questions. And this language, these statements, these questions will assert that all variations of thinking, learning, processing, and execution are valuable and valued. This is one way that we as tutors can respond to students' existing positive disability identities, or create an environment in which students can cultivate a positive disability identity. So, for example, if a student is in the pre-writing process, they're brainstorming, we might ask, how do you like to process ideas? Do you like to think about them out loud? Do you like to free write about them? Or do you like to quietly think by yourself? So this not only reaffirms the student's agency, but it treats all forms of processing as valid and valuable. It's not prioritizing one over the other. Another thing we might think about is executive functioning. We want to consider each student's executive functioning when approaching a tutoring session. Whether a student shows difficulty with executive functioning, or executive functioning seems to be a more pressing concern than the assignment itself, there are things we can do to accommodate that student. So if a student is showing difficulty with executive functioning, we can ensure that we are clearly defining sections of the assignment, or that we're breaking the tutoring session down into a series of very specific tangible goals before we delve into teaching content or working on skill development. If executive functioning seems to be a more pressing concern than the assignment or the content itself, we'll want to probably shift our attention away from that content or from the assignment and focus on scaffolding the tasks that need to be done, and writing or verbally creating a plan of how and when each task will be done. So in this kind of situation, it's the means, not the end, with which we are concerned and with which they are concerned. Many students that I've worked with don't necessarily need help learning material, understanding content, applying class concepts. It's that they need to leave feeling prepared and confident with an understanding of the assignment and how they're going to go about completing it. Um, Another thing that we can do is we can consider sensory needs, especially if a student seems overstimulated. Think about ways that you might be able to alter the environment. So you may suggest moving to a quieter, darker, or calmer area. And what this looks like for you depends, of course, on your tutoring center. In my undergraduate, I worked at the writing center there, and there were private rooms available for tutoring sessions. So I would often suggest moving to a private room if the library got loud or chaotic. Otherwise, at WCC, we don't have any private rooms. So what we'll do is we'll suggest moving to a corner of the room with maybe less fluorescent lighting, corners that feel a little bit quieter. There are tables directly facing the walls, and those can feel a bit more private, a bit calmer than tables that are directly in the center of the room with students moving in and out of the tutoring center. You might also consider students' personal space. So are you sitting too close to the student? Are they sitting too close to other students? There are so many adjustments that we can make to accommodate a student. And sometimes it will be appropriate to suggest a break. So if a student is overstimulated and the accommodations you can offer just aren't adequate at the moment, let them know that you'll be there to help when they are comfortable and ready. Wonderful. And we want to make sure that we're using clear and direct communication. So avoid language that's vague or language that has a hidden meaning to it. And one thing that I really like is this CLEAR acronym. So we are going to want to use concrete numbers. So 3-part outline, 20 minutes. We want our language again to be literal. So no idioms or hidden subtext. We want explicit criteria. So a paragraph of 5 to 6 sentences is what we may consider done. There's a big difference between, oh, I'll let you finish this versus, I'll come back and take a look when you're finished and you've written 5 to 6 sentences. We want to use actionable verbs. So circle, cut, add, for example, versus verbs that are a little bit more vague, like improve or polish. And we'll often want to repeat our directions or instructions in writing. Many students learn best or process information best verbally, so we'll want to make sure that we're doing that as well. But I've always found it helpful to reiterate key information in written form. Overall, with this CLEAR acronym, there's a big difference between let's work on structure for a bit versus let's spend 10 minutes creating a 3-part outline for this body paragraph. Claim, evidence, significance, or I'll give you some time to finish this versus I'll give you some time to write a paragraph of 5 or 6 sentences. We'll use the 3-part outline we created. I'll check back with you in 20 minutes. And one of the most important things, and something my colleague Max so wonderfully explained, is we want to focus on the individual student's growth, not how close or how far they are from normative standards of success. So just as thinking, learning, processing, executing differ from student to student, so too does success. And your job as a tutor is not always to get students' work to teachers or professors A level or ensure mastery of a skill or concept. There are so many versions of success that come before these normative standards. As a tutor, it's your job to identify where students are at and align success in relation to that point. So sometimes success is a student writing a paragraph, right? Just getting a paragraph on paper. Sometimes it's a student turning an assignment in on time, right? So regardless of what that assignment looks like or how it's meeting normative standards, we just want to make sure that's in on time. That could be a huge success. Sometimes the biggest success is simply coming into the tutoring center to seek assistance and ask for help. All right, so we are going to do another Padlet. It's very similar to the one that my colleague Max just did. There's a QR code right here. And so you can go ahead and scan that. If a link is better, Brett just kindly sent the link in the group chat. But I will give you, a few minutes, I think probably 3 minutes to answer the questions. And again, please don't feel pressure to answer all of them. But I'll give you 3 minutes now. All right, thank you everyone for participating. If you're still typing a response, feel free to continue to do so and go ahead and submit that. I'll start with this first question. So a student opens up about their academic experiences. They tell you that they've struggled in school for as long as they can remember, and they don't think they'll ever be a good student. So how might you respond? And this is where we can bring in those neuroaffirmative statements, and really use this as an opportunity to create an environment of positive disability identity. So I'm seeing a lot of really great responses. I really like, someone pointed out, asking if they use any accessibility services. Sometimes part of our job as tutors is delegating tasks and directing students to other resources within the campus. So I think that's a wonderful thing to keep in mind, right? What other resources outside of the tutoring center could be helpful? There's a lot of great phrases being put here, validating the student's experience. Like, it's hard to feel like you're struggling in school, and it's hard to battle those thoughts. So validating that those emotions are real and that they're warranted, they're seen, and they're understood is really important. I'm also seeing a lot of really wonderful kind of relations that people are making. So maybe saying, I had subjects that I really struggled with. I understand where you're coming from. And then, of course, there's a lot of that affirmation, which Max talked about, right? So, you know, there isn't one good way to be a student. There isn't one right way to be a student. We'll figure out right now together what works for you. And we'll make sure that you leave here feeling a little bit more confident than you did before. So really, really wonderful responses. And I will let my colleague Dylan take the second question, but thank you so much for all of your participation. I would highly recommend you all scroll through and read those responses for the first question because there is a lot of really helpful information there.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And I must say I'm seeing a lot of the same great responses for the second question. We've got a great audience here. So a student brings in an assignment sheet and says that they are completely overwhelmed and have no idea what to do, even though they understand the content. They've tried to work on it, but can't seem to get started, right? We have a response here that says, break things down into chunks. What is the assignment asking for? How do you want to respond? How are you going to build your argument, etc. Right? This is great stuff. And throughout these responses, we saw a lot about giving step-by-step approaches, breaking the task into smaller steps, because as Claire so beautifully pointed out, was this is not about knowing specific information about a topic. This is about executive functioning and about how we approach certain subjects. So, with there are going to be certain instances where when you're tutoring a student, you're not talking about information that is specific to your field. You're going to be talking about, okay, here's how we approach a problem. Here's how we create that scaffolding, right? Yeah, right. Great. I usually pick a problem at random and help them start from the beginning. I remind them to go step by step, slow down, and don't think too far ahead. Usually a few problems with me sitting with them and reassuring them will help them break down the mental barrier that was overwhelming them, right? Being patient, opening up to the student. We talked about this in the last section, right? All this helps, all these different strategies together create a really productive tutoring session. If your student is willing to open up to you, they'll possibly be open up to working through different strategies with you. Here we had I don't remember where it was, but someone recommended using a flow chart visualization would be helpful, right? I think as tutors, we should all feel open to using, special secondary materials to help support our tutoring. A lot of those visual aids can be helpful for students. This is another part of being flexible as a tutor, being able to adapt to different learning styles, right? So if someone is feeling overwhelmed by looking at the prompt, just reading the prompt on the sheet of paper, okay, maybe we can present that prompt in a different way. This is something I've seen many people do at WCC, which is it's a great strategy. Trying to change the prompt to adapt to different people's learning abilities.
Thank you so much, Dylan. That was really wonderful. I appreciate your moderation. For this last question, it says, you just need to polish this paragraph. I'll give you some time to finish it. And then we want to know, how would we revise this statement based on the CLEAR acronym of communication? And so as I'm scrolling through these responses, I'm seeing a lot of really wonderful things. We see a lot of numbers, right? 5 minutes, 5 to 6 sentences. I'm seeing a lot of really great active specific verbs. So highlight, cut, reread. That sounds really wonderful. There's a lot of scaffolding going on as well. So first we're going to do this specific thing, then we're going to do this specific thing. A lot of this, a lot of transitory words like this, then, next. So I think that's really wonderful. And again, I would highly recommend you all read through these responses because there is so much great information there.
Okay, and now we're just going to do a quick recap of everything that we've talked about today. So we want to think about cultivating a positive disability identity by helping students see the benefits of their neurodivergence.
We want to use a neuroaffirmative language, and we want to help students see the benefits of their neurodivergence.
We want to help accept students at the level that they are at.
And by doing so, we avoid normative standards of success.
We also want to be aware that some neurodivergent traits might make it seem like students are not fully engaged, but we never want to assume that this is always the case.
And to be mindful of that, we can consider student sensory needs and executive functioning. And we also want to consider the clarity of our own communication using the CLEAR acronym.
And lastly, we want to affirm student skills and what they are doing well. So keeping in mind all of these things, we do want to give some time for any questions that anybody might have for us. Feel free to unmute or raise your hand or just type in the chat as well.
I just want to say thank you for this presentation. I'm neurodivergent and I've been a tutor at our center at IVCC for going to 3 years. And I'm texting my boss, who's one of the moderators, literally saying we should look at this preview for anyone that's in our school that's not in the session, because I think I'm the only one right now. But it's like really clear steps, a lot of language I'm already familiar with. So I hope that this helped other people as well that are or not, that work with students that are. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. That's so sweet. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. That means a lot to us. We really appreciate your input.
Yeah, I agree with Sonia. There's so many of us neurodivergent people who have spent our school careers thinking that we just couldn't do it. And it's clearly not true. Look how far many of us neurodivergent tutors have come, and being able to instill the idea that, no, you can do it in our neurodivergent students is so important.
Thank you. That's really sweet. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and very true too. It's our job to bolster students' confidence and let them know, like, the problem is not you. The problem is these rigid prescriptive standards.
I see, Linnell, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I agree this content is really meaningful and also much needed across our learning centers. And the question I have is, if I'm interested to know if in your learning centers you're also exploring any of incorporation of the concept of body doubling.
Of body doubling?
Oh,
yes.
This.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, bodily doubling is so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So body doubling is just working alongside a student, correct?
Correct.
So they're working on their homework or their assignment, and you're doing the same. Um, That is body doubling is not a concept that was incorporated into like our official training, but I think it's something that happens a lot in the writing center. So a lot of times, if there's a lull and we're not working with multiple students at once, we will sit down at a table, and be reading or doing our own homework, while the student is doing theirs. Like we said, we're all in grad school. We all have our own homework. So there are many times that we will utilize body doubling, and we find that to be a very helpful strategy as well.
We're actually looking at formalizing that. We're not going to call it that for the students just because that's such a clinical sounding thing. And it also has, outside of our realm, has other implications. But we're exploring the idea of accountability groups is what we're going to call it. And using our academic coaches. And Westchester University actually piloted something like this a while ago, which is where I was inspired by. And so anyway, so I thought I'd pose the question to see if that was something that you were working with.
Yeah, it's not something that we have actively worked with, but I think it's definitely another great tool to use in a tutorial and in a writing setting for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the name accountability group, I think that's a wonderful way to frame it.
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds friendlier, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I think we had maybe a question in the chat. A workshop for working with neurotypical students.
I was just kind of dropping a joke that I think a lot of us here are neurodivergent. And so for me, the not normal, what feels not normal is neurotypical thinking
Right.
patterns. And sometimes I struggle to explain things in a neurotypical way.
Yeah,
and I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say, I think the nice thing about a lot of these tools is they can be utilized for any student, right? This presentation has been posed for working with neurodivergent students specifically, but almost every student benefits from all of these, all of being clear and being kind and empathetic.
You could frame it as,
No, go ahead.
I was going to say quickly, you could frame it as addressing neurodiversity, which is kind of a more broader term, like as opposed to specifically neurodivergent people, just the idea of people who think different ways. How can we adapt as tutors in different scenarios, right? To address everyone, right?
And I was just going to say the act of accommodating often helps everyone, like ramps, for example. Ramps are there for people in wheelchairs, but they're awfully helpful for people who aren't too.
Exactly. That's a really great way of thinking about it. Yeah, I think for so long, hegemonic society has made inclusion to be something of like a compromise. And that's really not the case. It's beneficial for everyone. It's very mutually beneficial. And thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here, for being such active listeners, for participating and giving such thoughtful, empathetic responses to our Padlet questions. We truly appreciate it. At this point, we are open to taking maybe one or two questions if there are any. But if not, we just want to extend our gratitude.
Yes, thank you everybody so much.
I actually do have a question. I had brought up to both of our coordinators recently that I've been overhearing things about other tutors struggling with neurodiverse students. And I always try to bring up training. We have like a Center for Accessibility, and our coordinator there, she has done some training. Is there ever something that could be an option for that, or even just to bring up to the moderator that is in this channel, like for tutoring, to have kind of like even sessions dedicated to that, to help peer and professional tutors feel more equipped or understand how to navigate stuff like this?
I think workshops are a wonderful idea. Any kind of training and discussion that can be had about this topic, I think, is beneficial. And so, yeah, I would really recommend that any coordinators consider like sessions specific to working with neurodivergent students. And there are so many different components that we can think about. So there's, the first step of understanding neurodivergence, right? What it is, the spectrum-like nature of it. There are the attitudinal shifts that need to be made, implicit biases that may need to be dismantled. And then there are the practical strategies that can be applied. So how do those attitudinal shifts manifest in sessions? I believe this presentation is being recorded. And if that is the case, you are, of course, more than welcome to use it or reference it in any way. We'll also show you a works cited page. And these are some really great sources that we pulled from in putting this presentation together. So I would recommend taking a look at these as well.
Hey, I hate to jump in here. We are at the half hour, so we do need to wrap up. So a couple of quick housekeeping things. As Claire mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. However, in order to get access to it, you will need to fill out the survey form at least once. So that survey link has gone into the chat, as well as the email in case you need any sort of proof of attendance for time cards or for training purposes. I am going to ask everybody to please turn on your cameras so I can grab a couple of screenshots of all of us together. And this is also going to be one last call to throw out your name and institution into the chat to sort of log into the session if you didn't get a chance at the start of the session. So just going to give everybody a second to turn their cameras on.
You'll need to probably stop the share so you can get everybody on the screen. There we go.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I think that's probably everybody who's going to turn their camera on. So everybody give us a good smile. 3, 2, oops. 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's the first one, and I do actually need to do a second one because we have so many people. So give me just 1 second. All right, and second shot, 3, 2, 1. All right, awesome. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You were a great audience. Thanks.
Thank you. Great session.